So we've used gold for a while, but then we started realizing that, there are some problems with using gold and that there might be something we can add onto it to make it better to use. And this is when paper bills came along. So between the year 600 and 900s. Now, it's not this form of paper bills, it's another form of paper bills. So let's talk first about, well, what are the downfalls or the problems of gold? Well, first of all, it can be debased. What does that mean? Well, somebody can take a brick of gold, a coin, melt it, add some things to it, and make 2 more coins, or make a coin and a half from it. So basically, it can be debased. Can fluctuate. So the supply can fluctuate. So I have an example here, the California gold rush. This hasn't happened often. The California gold rush is one of the only times, or maybe another time too, where we found a huge supply of gold. And what happens when the supply just increases like that? Well, the gold you have in your pocket suddenly isn't worth as much, right? It's hard to transport. So if you need to pay somebody a huge amount of sum, well, you're going to be carrying a lot of gold, which could be dangerous in those times, right? I guess you can imagine. It's dangerous now. Issues with having multiple denominations. So you have a brick of gold, you have a coin. You can only have, so many denominations. Right now with paper bills, you have, $10, a $20, $100, a 5. You have coins, $1, a cent. So multiple denominations. That was an issue with gold. And limited supply. So, there's a finite amount of gold on the earth. So those are all problems with gold. Now, started using paper money between the year 1600 and 1600 by the Chinese. It was only adopted by the Europeans in the 17th century. So, Chinese started using it way before Europeans. And the form of this money was just IOUs. Okay, so it's an IOU. It's a piece of paper that says I owe you this amount of gold. So the way it worked was basically you had these shops that opened, and they were basically just banks. And you would go there, and in this bank, you could give this banker your piece of gold. So you go there and you tell them, hey, keep my coin, and the banker gives you an IOU. So this IOU is basically just a piece of paper, okay, that says I owe you, this gold coin. Now you here, you have this IOU because you don't want to keep this gold coin on you. You can go in the city, right? And you can use this IOU to purchase stuff. Why? Because everybody knows this bank and everybody knows that this IOU is worth this coin. So if you go here and you buy something with this coin, with this IOU, well, the person that gets it from you can go back to the bank and redeem the gold coin for the IOU. Now, what happened is this made it very easy for people to, buy things. So people started using the IOUs and kind of forgot about the coin. So maybe this guy uses the IOU to buy something, and the person who got this IOU doesn't even go back to redeem it. He uses it to buy something else. So these IOUs were redeemed at your local bank, right? But there were lots of different banks. So it's not all the same bank. So, every single bank had its different IOUs. They looked different. Okay. So, for example, I live here in Montreal. If I would have went and deposited my gold coin at this bank and I took the IOU, if then tomorrow I go, let's say this is Montreal, MTL. If I go to Toronto, okay, let me put it in the same color here. Okay, if I go to Toronto and I go there and I try to buy something with my paper bill here, well, the store is going to be like, what is this IOU here? My bank can't redeem this. I can't use this. The only way I can use this IOU is if I go all the way to Montreal to your bank and exchange it there. So I'm not going to value this IOU at its fair value. I might, say I'm only going to value it at 75% of its value because I need to go all the way to Montreal to pick up my coin. So you had multiple banks everywhere, right? And each bank had its own IOU. Within the same city, you had multiple banks. So yes, it was a step up from just using the coin, but it was also not very efficient. Now, a problem that started happening is that these banks were not really, great. It's just anybody could open their bank if they had the capital, So a bank could go belly up anytime and then your IOUs are worthless, right? So what these banks started doing is, let's say this bank here had 4 coins, okay? And it issued 4 IOUs for them. Now, the bank knows for a fact that, well, not for a fact, but it kind of guesses that not all 4 people are going to come and redeem the 4 coins at the same time. So what they started doing is saying, well, you know what? I can lend out 2 of these coins and make interest on them, loan them to people and make interest on them. And I'll keep 2 of these coins here in reserve. So if 2 out of the 4 people come back, I'll have their coins, but I'm going to lend away these. And this is what we call fractional reserve banking, okay? And this is something that happens, today, okay? You deposit money at the bank, they don't keep all your money there. They loan it out, right? Because they know that not everybody's going to come and take out their money at the same time, which happened often. It's called bank runs, right? So these banks did that. And what happened is sometimes there were bank runs. So if the 4 people here came and they were like, hey, we want our coins. Well, guess what? These 2 coins were not there anymore. Okay? Because they loaned them to people. Okay? And maybe these people defaulted, didn't come back. So there's only 2. So there's a bank run because the bank doesn't have all the currencies or all the gold that they're supposed to have. Okay? So what happened is we started having central banks. And the first central bank that came along was in England. Okay? So it was in 1694, and that was the Bank of England. So a central bank is basically a bank that comes along and says, okay, all you other small banks, local banks, no more of that. No more IOUs from each of you. Okay? From now on, no new banks are allowed to open. And old banks, when they close, they're done. We have to remove their IOUs from circulation. And the only banknote that we're going to use from now on, the only IOU, is going to come from the central bank itself. So each country now has its own central bank. And they're responsible for the currency, for the IOUs, for that country. And they print it and do all of that stuff. And this puts the country in control of the money supply, so how much currency there is, and regulations about fractional reserve banking. So banks cannot just, get 1,000 coins and lend out 99 coins of them because that's too risky. You're going to have a bank run and there's going to be all of these issues. So they have to be responsible for all of these things, overseeing the banks and making sure that the currency is stable and the money supply is sufficient, and that if you want to redeem this, you can redeem it. At this time, we're going to see how it changes. But yeah, so at this point, the government really started taking control of the banking system and issuing its own currency.